Chapter 52. Jesus spends 40 days in the temple groves, passes the fifth brotherhood test and receives the fifth degree, heroism. The sacred temple groves were rich in statues, monuments, and shrines. Here Jesus loved to walk and meditate. And after he had conquered self, he talked with nature in these groves for 40 days. And then the guide took chains and bound him hand and foot, and then cast him into a den of hungry beasts, of unclean birds and creeping things. The den was dark as night. The wild beast howled. The birds in fury screamed. The reptiles hissed. And Jesus said, "Who was it that did bind me thus? Why did I meekly sit to be bound down with chains? I tell you, none has power to bind a human soul. Of what are fetters made?" And in his might he rose, and what he thought were chains were only worthless cords that parted at his touch. And then he laughed and said, "The chains that bind men to the carcasses of earth are forged in fancy's shop, are made of air and welded in illusion's fires. If man will stand erect and use the power of will, his chains will fall like worthless rags, for will and faith are stronger than the stoutest chains that men have ever made." And Jesus stood erect among the hungry beasts and birds and said, "What is this darkness that envelopes me? 'Tis but the absence of the light." And what is the light? It is but the breath of God vibrating in the rhythm of rapid thought. And then he said, "Let there be light." And with a mighty will, he stirred the ethers up, and their vibrations reached the plane of light, and there was light. The darkness of that den of night became the brightness of a newborn day. And then he looked to see the beasts and birds and creeping things. Lo, they were not. And Jesus said, "Of what are souls afraid? Fear is the chariot in which man rides to death. And when he finds himself within the chamber of the dead, he learns that he has been deceived. His chariot was a myth, and death is a fancy child. But someday all man's lessons will be learned, and from the den of unclean beasts and birds and creeping things he will arise to walk in light." And Jesus saw a ladder made of gold, on which he climbed, and at the top the white-robed priest awaited him. Again he stood before the council bar. Again no word was said. Again the Hierophant reached forth his hands to bless. He placed in Jesus' hand another scroll, and on this one was written, "Heroism." The Logos had encountered fear and all his phantom host, and in the conflict he achieved the victory. Thank you.